Good morning, everybody, and thanks so much for joining us here on KXAN Live. I'm Will Dupree. We hope you're enjoying your Monday morning. We are starting out today with some big breaking news. Beto O'Rourke, the former El Paso congressman, is officially jumping into the Texas governor's race. And this morning, we have gotten our first interview with him. He talked to KXAN before anybody else on the TV side of things about why he's announcing this race and why he's getting into it and challenging Governor Abbott. The reporter that he talked to today is Maggie Glynn, our own KXAN reporter here. Maggie, thank you so much for joining us. Again, what a big morning for everybody.
Thanks for having me, Will.
Yeah, and we should say that yesterday you were able to interview him, but kind of beforehand in his announcement. What were some of the things that stuck out to you? I guess this was kind of news that we were all expecting at some point to come.
That's right. You know, rumors have been flying for months now. It's something that I have been asking Beto since all the way back in June. When I asked him back then, I was like, you know, I have to ask because people are speculating. Are you going to be throwing your hat into the ring for governor, especially with so many Republican candidates already challenging Abbott back in June? He, at the time, said that he was focused on voting rights. The controversial voting bill was making its way through the legislature, and he was spending his time supporting state Democrats over in D.C. to make sure they could try to stop the bill, which eventually ended up being unsuccessful because that bill did pass. So I thought something that stuck out to me when interviewing him was the fact that the voting rights issues, while he still did slightly mention it, it wasn't the focus of the interview. He much more went into detail about how he would have handled the Texas winter freeze different. He multiple times brought up border issues and how Governor Abbott, in his mind, is not handling that the right way, but not a lot of focus on voting rights. So kind of it seemed to be a little bit of a pivot, at least in terms of what we've talked about in the past.
Yeah, and we did see there was about a 2-minute or so video that Beto put out on his Twitter account announcing this campaign, and really he framed it in right out the gate, talking about the February winter storm and all the power outages that happened at that time. He also dropped Medicaid expansion and legalizing marijuana in the state.
He did, and that's something also noteworthy of his video is that his first campaign ad essentially is just him talking to Texans. He's mentioning things that we all experienced, which was the Texas freeze. That's something that everyone can relate to. And then he's hitting on what seems to be part of his campaign too, like you said, Medicaid expansion and legalizing marijuana. So it'll be interesting to see which points his opponents pick to really hone in on going forward now that this is seemingly what he's going to be focusing on.
We, of course, are getting plenty of reaction, not only from Democrats here in the state, but also Republicans. Governor Greg Abbott's campaign sending out a statement earlier this morning, not too long after that video went up from Beto and his team. I just want to read you what it said in part, everybody out there. This again is from the communications director for Governor Abbott's campaign. They say, quote, Governor Abbott proudly supports the men and women of law enforcement, has deployed Texas National Guard and Texas Department of Public Safety personnel and resources to secure the border, and has created a business climate that's made Texas the economic engine of America. It goes on to say the last thing that Texans need is President Biden's radical liberal agenda coming to Texas under the guise of Beto O'Rourke. The contrast for the direction of Texas couldn't be clearer. Maggie, really picking up on a lot of those themes that we've heard from Governor Abbott over the last few months in some of the points that he's made to criticize not only President Biden, but Democrats.
Right. This is something that we've been hearing from the governor for quite some time now, especially the border issues. That's something that he's tweeting about these days almost daily, sending out pictures of the temporary barrier that the National Guard has been building, which I will note, however, that only as of last week was only about 4 miles, but he keeps driving the border issues down on our southern border home, and that's where Beto O'Rourke says he thinks we should be handling it differently, especially him being in El Paso. He does live in a border town. It'll be really interesting to kind of see the two of them go in on it in terms of how they think the border crisis should be handled.
And we will say now that everybody who's watching, we are going to play Maggie's interview with Beto O'Rourke in full. It's more than 8 minutes long. He gave you quite a bit of time yesterday to talk to him, Maggie.
He did, and it was really fascinating, again, to just hear the kind of not switch, if you will, but the definite kind of change in rhetoric. Before, he seemed to be a little more on the attack, which he still is critical of Governor Abbott, but he seemed to more be focused on trying to appeal to more moderate voters, trying to appeal to Texans' sense of unity, and trying to point out the flaws, the several emergencies that our state has experienced over the past 2 years, and kind of hone in on the state's, what he says are failures with those different crises.
And most people in the state, I would imagine, know who Beto O'Rourke is, but give us some context about his past, how he got to this point.
So that was one of my questions for him, actually, because he was a former congressman, and then he did run against U.S. Senator Ted Cruz back in 2018 for the one of 2 Texas Senate seats, and he lost. And then he again in 2019 decided to throw his hat into the ring for president. He announced back in March of 2019, and almost eight months later withdrew his name because it was a pretty crowded field for Democrats for president. But I asked him, losing both of those times, why do you think you would be the best candidate this time around? And he said that, in summary, he said that Texans should, again, come together. He said Texans know what to do at the end of the day when the state is experiencing so many crises. And he said that not only does he have a chance, but he thinks he can win this time around. So, again, only time will tell.
Again, very early in this process, but we know now he is the only Democrat, the major Democrat, that has announced to run for governor. So let's listen in now to Maggie's interview with Beto O'Rourke. You can also find more coverage of this on our website, but for now we're going to play you the full interview in full. Again, it's about 8 minutes, so here it is.
First of all, let's talk timing. We've heard rumors about you possibly throwing your hat into the ring for governor for quite some time now. And when you and I spoke back in early summer, you said that you were just focused on Texas voting rights. So tell me a little bit about why you're choosing now to throw your hat into the ring.
I'm running to try to help bring this state together to focus on the really big things that most Texans want us to do, like make sure that we have world-class public schools and that the best jobs that are being created in America are being created right here in Texas, and that we make progress on things that most of us agree on, like expanding Medicaid so that Texans can see a doctor, fill a prescription, be well enough to go to work or to finish their education or to start a business. But what we have right now instead in Texas under Greg Abbott is this very divisive kind of politics that has kept us apart and fighting over things like abortion or the permitless carry gun laws or which middle school girls can play which sports. I want this state to get back to doing the big things, the big, bold vision of Texas that used to define this state. That's what's so important to so many of us, regardless of political party or any other difference. And so I hope that as a candidate, I hope as governor, I can serve everyone and help to bring us together, bridge some of these divisions, and get the big things done that most Texans want us to work on.
You mentioned Governor Greg Abbott, kind of going back to the beginning of the summer when he was facing some pretty tough criticism, even from within his own party. Why not jump into the race back then? Why wait until now?
I think there's no shortage of reasons for people to fire Greg Abbott as governor. In fact, they grow by the day. I mean, we could look at the 72,000 lives lost in Texas by his failure to meet the challenges of this COVID pandemic, or the hundreds who were killed in a winter storm, not because of Mother Nature, but because of Greg Abbott and his failure to make sure that the power grid was working for all Texans. Or how about this? 7 out of 10 kids in the average Texas 4th grade classroom cannot read at grade level. Greg Abbott is failing the people of Texas. And so we got to make sure that everyone understands the consequence of Greg Abbott to our future and to our success and to the opportunities in Texas. And that we also understand that we have an alternative. As governor, I'm going to focus on making sure that we create great jobs in Texas, that we have the best public schools, and that we ensure people are well enough because they can see a doctor to be able to fulfill their own personal potential. And that as a state, we can live up to our promise.
After the tragic shooting that happened in your own hometown of El Paso, you came out with some pretty strong words. You said that you were ready to confiscate people's AR-15s and AK-47s. And Governor Abbott, while you still hadn't officially announced, already launched a campaign ad specifically quoting you on that. Have you changed how you feel about gun rights since then? Do you plan to change the rhetoric at all to appeal to some more moderate voters, especially considering that the state just passed permitless carry?
You know, like most Texans, I grew up in a household with guns, and I also grew up learning the responsibility of owning and using a firearm. It was my uncle, who was a sheriff's deputy, who first taught me how to shoot. I think most of us in this state agree that we shouldn't allow weapons of war to be on our streets and to see our fellow Texans shot up in Walmarts, in movie theaters, in schools, and in churches. I think most of us also agree that Greg Abbott's permitless carry law, which law enforcement in Texas asked him not to sign, which allows any Texan to carry a loaded gun in public, will make us less safe. The number one responsibility of our governor and my number one focus will be keeping the people of Texas safe. We can protect the Second Amendment and protect the lives of our fellow Texans, and we should be focused on doing that.
With losing your bid for Senate back in 2018 and then again for your presidential bid in 2019, why do you think you are the right candidate for Democrats for this specific office in Texas this time around?
Look, I trust the people of Texas. When it really counts, we put our differences behind us and we get the job done. We saw that during the power grid failure when people knocked on their neighbors' doors, helped them to get water or food or heat or transportation. Given the challenges we have before us right now, I believe that if we go everywhere, listen to everyone, write nobody off, and take no one for granted, not only can we win this election, but together we can work as a state, not as Democrats and not as Republicans, but as Texans, to ensure that we create better jobs, focus on world-class public schools, and do things that most of us already agree on, like expand Medicaid so that all of us can see a doctor. I think those are the basic common values that we have as Texans. I'm going to speak to that, campaign on that, and work with my fellow Texans to make sure that we get that done.
One of the governor's biggest talking points this past year, he even had a rally with former President Trump down at the border, is the current crisis that we're seeing along our southern border. Obviously, you being from El Paso, you are in a border town. How would you tackle the current crisis that we're seeing differently than Governor Abbott? And do you think that the Biden administration is doing enough to respond right now?
Look, like my neighbors here in El Paso on the border, and like my fellow Texans, we want to make sure that we follow the law and that there's order and predictability and safety at our border with Mexico. And we can be doing a better job. And I look forward to partnering with the administration to make sure that we do a better job and that we listen to the people who actually live on the border and have the experience and the solutions to provide to ensure that as we rewrite our country's immigration laws, that we reflect the priorities of Texas. But what we don't need is a governor who's more interested in photo opportunities and grandstanding at the border, and who actually incites the kind of fear and anxiety that leads to the attacks that we saw in El Paso in 2019, where someone echoed the rhetoric of Greg Abbott about invasions and defending Texas and taking matters into your own hands, and did just that and killed 23 people in this community. There is a responsible way to do this, and there's a Texas way to make sure that we have a secure border that honors the best traditions of this country. And I want to make sure that we pursue that as governor.
And last question for you. Obviously, Texas is a traditionally red state. What's your message to voters to flip one of the highest, if not the highest, office in our state blue this year?
You know, in the 2020 election, arguably the most important in American history, at least in our lifetimes, 7 million eligible Texans didn't cast a ballot. So I wouldn't say we're a red state. We're certainly not a blue state. I think it's more accurate to describe us as a non-voting state. We've got to make sure that we reach out to every single one of our fellow Texans and give them a reason to participate and to vote. And I know that when we focus on the things that really matter most to all of us, like the kind of job that we can look forward to, or the quality of school that our child attends, or ability to see a doctor and be well enough to do the things that we want to do in our lives, we give people a reason to vote and participate. That's how we win. That's how we work together and serve everyone here in the state of Texas.
And there you have it, the first TV interview there with Beto O'Rourke since he officially announced his run for Texas governor. Maggie, Glynn joining me again here in the KXAN live studio after securing that interview with Beto yesterday ahead of this announcement that came just not too long ago, about an hour or so. Maggie, I want to point out that he is the only major Democrat that has announced a run for governor. However, on the Republican side, there are a number of candidates. You've talked to one of them in particular. Maybe lay out who is running on the Republican side just to catch people up on that.
Yeah, definitely. So we already heard the official statement from Governor Abbott's campaign spokesperson, but two other primary Republican candidates include Alan West and Don Huffines, who I actually spoke with this morning. And Don Huffines is interesting because he actually is also going after Governor Abbott, but for almost extreme opposite reasons than Beto. He says that the governor isn't doing enough at our border, but he says he would increase militarization. He says that he could secure our border within 30 days if he were elected governor. But again, he has stark differences from Beto. He's going at Governor Abbott for the complete opposite reasons. But he says that he doesn't think the governor has done enough to respond to the border, and he also thinks he overstepped his powers during the course of the pandemic. So I also obviously asked him about should Beto throw his hat into the ring. How would he go at attacking Beto if he did win the primary? And Huffines said that Beto essentially doesn't have a chance here in Texas. He thinks that the state is traditionally red. It has been for the past 20 years, and he thinks that Beto throwing his hat into the ring is essentially not something to worry about at this point. But then again, I would point to Beto's point at the end of that interview when he said he doesn't think that the state is traditionally red. He doesn't think it's blue either, but he thinks it's a non-voting state, and so that's where Beto is going to try and really rally voters who maybe haven't voted in past elections to really turn out both in the primaries and in the 2022 election itself.
Well, everybody, Maggie Glynn has been joining me as we've shared her interview that she got, the first TV interview with Beto O'Rourke since announcing his run for governor. Maggie, very nice work, and I know this is the start of only busy times ahead, so we appreciate all that you've done.
It's primary season. Well, thanks so much.
It already is, yeah. All right, Maggie, well, I'm going to send you on your way so that you can keep reporting. Everybody, Maggie's going to still be collecting reaction from many different sides that are coming in today because lots and lots are pouring in. I was just going through our inbox a few moments ago, and wow, already from both sides of the aisle, they're pouring into our newsroom, so just stay with us as we continue collecting that. So, Maggie, thank you again.
Thanks so much, Will.
All right, everybody, if you would like to read more about what Beto O'Rourke is prioritizing in his run, you can find it now on our website, KXAN.com. You can also view it on the KXAN News app, so please download that if you haven't done so already on your smartphone. Again, reaction coming in from both Republicans and Democrats as Beto O'Rourke becomes the first major Democrat to jump into the governor's race here in Texas. It's going to get interesting, so stay with us. Thank you all again for watching. Will Dupree in the KXAN live studio. We'll see you back here another time. Please, everybody, stay safe and healthy out there. Take care.